While the causes of child trafficking are multifaceted and complex, the reality is that trafficking impacts upon children's rights to liberty, dignity, and security. Historically linked with the slave trade, two main forms of exploitation occur: labour and sexual services. Ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the later adoption of the Palermo Protocol by many countries raised the awareness of the human rights of children and their physical, psychological and social development. Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing criminal enterprises and is the third most profitable criminal activity. The trade in the sexual exploitation of children is proving most lucrative. However, criminal organisations are not the only perpetrators of child exploitation, as individuals, business owners, family and community members, law enforcement and immigration officials may all be involved in child trafficking. It has also become common for traffickers to hire older trafficked children to return to their local community to recruit other children, thus perpetuating the child trafficking cycle. According to the widely accepted definition of the Palermo Protocol, trafficking includes an action of recruitment, transfer, or receipt of a child for the purposes of exploitation within or outside of their country. Statistics on trafficked children are unreliable. However, it is estimated that at least 25% of trafficked people are under the age of 18. Thailand is a major hub of child trafficking, with it being a source, transit and destination country due to its location and multiple borders. Poor minority and rural communities, especially from the northern regions, are particularly vulnerable to recruitment and travel to urban and tourist areas where they are exploited. Over 2 million undocumented Burmese live in Thailand, with as many as 5% of new births undocumented, exposing them as easy targets for cross-border smuggling, having no rights as citizens. A lack of legal status affords them little or no access to health, education, political influence, and the buying or selling of land or ownership of businesses. Although Western sex tourism is blamed for the growth in child exploitation and trafficking, it is the Thai demand which accounts for the majority of consumers, with 60% of Thai men regularly accessing brothels. High levels of irregular and intra-regional migration in Southeast Asia result in many children from poor areas being lured with the promise of well-paid employment and good educational opportunities to large urban centres. Upon arrival, they discover that they have been deceived and are forced to work to repay an incurred debt to the traffickers. Girls experience violence and mistreatment, resulting in long-term psychological trauma. Children are trafficked to Thailand from Laos and Vietnam. However, the majority come from Myanmar. Ethnic conflict, political unrest, extreme poverty, and a poor educational system all contribute to the vulnerability of Myanmar's children. Indigenous mountain tribes and refugees in Thailand, such as the Chin and Muslim Rohingya, are targeted due to their economic status and lack of rights as citizens. Any documentation is often confiscated by the traffickers upon arrival, rendering the person legally powerless. Child trafficking is a blatant human rights violation and has a profound long-term effect on a child's well-being. A child's psychological development is damaged due to the physical, emotional and sexual abuse they endure. Children are isolated from family and community support systems, threatened and treated like a piece of property, living in unhealthy conditions. Escaping is stifled by disempowerment and a fear of retaliation to them or their family. The physical health of girls trafficked into prostitution is irreparably impacted, as high rates of STIs, HIV and AIDS are common. However, it is the long-term mental health challenges caused by feelings of anger, frustration and a low self-esteem which result in post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, severe anxiety and ultimately withdrawal and social isolation.
The Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, are 8 international development goals that were established following the Millennium Summit of the United Nations in 2000. MDG 1, which aims to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, shows importance to address in relation to child trafficking, as hunger and poverty are causal factors. Perpetrators of child trafficking can include the families and communities who are often vulnerable people who are living in poverty without adequate nutrition and standards of living, and see no alternative to the child sex or labour trade and subsequent trafficking. These issues lead directly to MDG 2, which aims to achieve universal primary education, as education can be a preventative measure against both poverty and child trafficking. With additional education, there are further opportunities for employment and alternate trade. Girls are particularly vulnerable to the sex and labour exploitation due to gender inequality, which MDG 3 aims to address by promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women. Child trafficking can result in rape, as well as physical and mental abuse of females, which is a violation of women's rights and denies gender equality. MDG 3 interconnects with MDG 2, as education is an avenue for women's rights promotion and can be incorporated into education. A direct correlation to gender inequality and sex trafficking is HIV/AIDS, which MDG 6 aims to combat. The United Nations Office on Drug and Crime states, "The susceptibility of a trafficked woman to HIV/AIDS is certainly higher than that of a person who engages in sex work out of choice. This is due to unprotected sex with multiple partners, the use of drugs for compliance, and a lack of education surrounding the disease." Each of the MDGs are accompanied by specific and measurable objectives the countries endeavour to reach. Reports are issued periodically to identify the progression of each country towards these goals, as well as the global progression. The report issued by Thailand's Office of the National Economic and Social Development Board in 2009 identifies the specific objectives and the progression of Thailand towards their achievement. As you can see in the table, Thailand is progressing well towards meeting the MDGs by 2015, as well as identifying areas for further development such as education and the further reduction in poverty. Statistical data surrounding Myanmar's progression towards the MDGs is limited. However, a thematic analysis released in 2011 as a collaborative piece through the United Nations Country Team identifies areas of improvement as well as areas for improvement in Myanmar. Additionally, the analysis includes broad statistics that show a reduction in poverty between 2005 and 2010. Nationally, poverty has reduced from 32% to 25.6%. Rural poverty has decreased from 36% to 29.2%, and urban poverty has decreased from 22% to 15.7%. Furthermore, Myanmar has drafted a national plan of action for the advancement of women 2011 and to 2015, which aligns with MDG 3. There is progression towards MDG 6, with the number of doctors and nurses doubling in the last 2 decades, but progress is slow.
Children of the Kingdom of Thailand are actually highly protected under Thai law. They are now protected from all types of abuse, mistreatment, exploitation and trafficking. But how does a Thai prove they are Thai? And how does a child prove they are a child? Where do the unregistered children previously identified by Carolyn fit? Thailand's road to child protection has been long, and like most countries, it is not yet complete. The first significant turn happened in 1996, when the kingdom outlawed all forms of prostitution and facilitation of prostitution in the Prevention and Suppression of Prostitution Act. This act introduced harsh sentencing options for involving children under the age of 16 in prostitution and absolution of guilt for the child. The following year, these changes were entrenched in the nation's penal code. In 2001, legislation was passed providing victims of crime with a pathway to compensation for damages to persons, including children, whose life, body, or mind has been injured by a criminal offence. Although this legislation was a great step forward for victims' rights in Thailand, it is difficult for them to get blood from a stone, so to speak, and impossible for them to get compensation from an unknown offender. However, the ranges of offences against which a victim could potentially claim compensation was extended considerably in 2003. 2003 was a significant year for the children of Thailand. In this year, the children introduced extensive protections for children with the passing of the Child Protection Act. This act defined a variety of conditions in which unlawful treatment of children can exist. It also defined the proper care and treatment of a child, including measures to ensure their safety, nurture, physical and mental well-being, as well as their actual access to education. In addition, the Act clearly defines matters pertaining to guardianship and the care and protection of street children and children in difficult circumstances. Street children were defined as children with no parent or guardian to care for them who were left to wander from place to place. Children in difficult circumstances were defined as impoverished or abandoned children, or any child who has to shoulder familial responsibilities beyond their age or ability. Provisions were made for these children to fall under the care and protection of the state or to a state-approved guardian like Destiny Rescue. Interestingly, this act also took the radical step of defining deprivation of freedom, sexual abuse, and inducing children to behave in a manner that is illegal or likely to cause physical or mental harm as torture. Furthermore, it expressly protected Thai children from trafficking, sale, and sexual exploitation of all kinds. These wide-ranging changes were then enshrined within the Thai Criminal Code the same year. At the same time, the Kingdom introduced the Social Welfare Protection Act, legislating for the first time an extensive social security system aimed at reducing socio-economic conditions that so frequently underpin a parent's decision to sell their children. The Act also established a Social Welfare Protection Fund and a committee to administer the fund. Furthermore, it clearly defined the training and functions of social workers and firmly entrenched them as experts in the assessment of a person's social security needs and key advisors within the social service system. In 2006, Thailand went a step further down the path to securing human rights for Thai people by making a voluntary written pledge to the United Nations General Assembly. This pledge reaffirmed their commitment to the work of the United Nations and the Kingdom's commitment to honour their human rights treaties. This voluntary pledge was then followed up more formally in 2007 when the Kingdom of Thailand enshrined the rights of all peoples to dignity, liberty, gender equality, freedom from discrimination, and freedom from torturous, cruel, or inhumane treatment in their new constitution. This constitution has the potential to radically change the futures of the children of Thailand, as it forms a platform for strengthening law enforcement and tackling their long-running battle with corruption. Interestingly, the first legislative change under the new constitution was the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act, which introduced heavy penalties for trafficking and then tripled them for government officials conspiring to traffic. Organisations like Destiny Rescue hope that gaining greater control over the government corruption will free up the resources needed to ensure more Thai children are registered at birth, enabling more children to seek protection under Thai law.
Destiny Rescue is a grassroots Christian non-profit organisation committed to rescuing children from human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Destiny Rescue currently operates various programs in 5 nations: Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar or Burma, and India. in addition to having 2 offices in donor nations, Australia and the United States. The organisation alleges to have rescued hundreds of children who were enslaved, as well as running prevention programs, social justice campaigns, awareness raising, and running rescue homes and training and employment centres for rescued girls. The organisation has both paid and volunteer staff working at their US and Australian offices, as well as on the ground in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and India. The organisation is financed by philanthropic donations, community and church fundraising, corporate sponsorships and volunteerism opportunities. Destiny Rescue raises awareness, generates funding and advertises volunteering opportunities through social media. Natalie Henderson, a Destiny Rescue case manager in Thailand, states, "As you can imagine, this is a challenging area to work, but it more than makes up for its challenges. I personally feel very blessed to be working here at Destiny Rescue with these beautiful volunteers, incredible Thai staff, and to build into and love and do whatever I can to secure a bright future for these amazing, beautiful, priceless young women." There are several important ethical considerations relevant to Destiny Rescue and the work that it undertakes. These include religious context, volunteerism, white saviour issues, corruption, local legislation, cultural issues including collectivism and poverty, and moral panic regarding sex work. As stated, Destiny Rescue is a Christian organisation. According to Destiny Rescue case manager in Thailand, Natalie Henderson, girls who come to Destiny Rescue homes are expected to attend Christian church. The website states, "Once children we've rescued enter our care, we bring them into one of our many rescue homes, where they'll be safe and can grow up in a Christ-centred, loving environment." The use of the words Christ-centred would allude to an exclusion of Islam, Hinduism and Buddhism. Henderson states that the girls are able to practice their own religion in addition to attending church. According to Henderson, while Destiny Rescue staff and volunteers are not required to be Christian, a majority of them are. Certainly, the religious background of the organisation could cause ethical issues which international social work practitioners should be aware of and responsive to. Another area of ethics to explore is the concept of sex work and moral panic. Sloan and Wahab state that moral panic regarding sexual morality is based in conservative, Christian, white Western social norms. They state that the most common social approach to prostitution excludes the voices and perspectives of prostitutes, and in doing so victimises women and denies their agency in choosing to engage in sex work. Certainly, studies with child prostitutes in Thailand state that often the children do not see themselves as victims. They see sex work as an opportunity to earn income and support their impoverished families. Destiny Rescue case manager Natalie Henderson agrees, stating that one of the challenges lies in the fact that the girls want to support their families and communities, and that this is a cultural norm. Differing perspectives and moralities regarding sex work between cultures is a crucial consideration. Another key ethical consideration is volunteer tourism or voluntourism. There are a number of ethical issues associated with this to consider. According to McGee, taking untrained short-term volunteers or tourists into the homes, schools and orphanages of vulnerable children can create the potential for many serious ethical issues. Destiny Rescue runs schoolies mission trips where school leavers can go on 1 or 2 week volunteering trips to rescue homes in Thailand or Cambodia. In addition, the organisation offers short-term mission trips for families and individuals who can assist with village outreaches. Furthermore, for $4,995, volunteers can participate in Ride to End Slavery, a motorbike trip through Cambodia and Thailand where there is also opportunities to visit rescue homes. The short time frame of these missions is important to consider in terms of ethics, as is the contact given with the girls in rescue homes. A further ethical issue regarding schoolies mission trips is the close age proximity of the schoolies and the girls. In addition, it is also important to consider that there is no preferred gender for these volunteers, which may be distressing for young women who have suffered sexual abuse at the hands of men. Furthermore, according to Mustafa Ansad, some forms of volunteer tourism may burden the host communities and increase dependency on volunteer sending nations. Inconsistencies in work ethic of volunteers can exist as the level of volunteering may vary as a result of changing circumstances such as weather, health, personal distractions, for example romance, availability of financial benefits, for the example reductions in cost for group leisure experiences, or the nature of work to be undertaken. According to Lyons et al., one of the greatest ethical considerations lies in the fact that volunteer tourists may be more interested in objectives relating to self and the idea of themselves as altruistic and giving.
The lives of children caught in sexual exploitation could be improved by adopting several strategies. The first of these is to expand Destiny Rescue's houses to include some specifically for boys due to the growing numbers being trafficked and sexually exploited. While Thailand has implemented child protection legislation, it has proven difficult to operationalise because of corruption and entrenched social norms regarding sex. We suggest an education campaign about child exploitation specifically targeting law enforcement and judicial officers. Destiny Rescue runs several programs which we believe operate as volunteerism. These programs attract valuable funding from overseas volunteers visiting Thailand. We recommend a shift from service to learning travel in order to practice more ethically. A framework centred around learning and engagement instead of merely observing and giving things away would be a better option for volunteers, but more importantly, for the very vulnerable rescued children. Finally, a public awareness campaign targeted at migrant or minority young people who are most vulnerable to being lured and recruited to the cities with the promise of big money or a great education. A media initiative exposing the false promises of these recruiters should be developed. Join us and organisations like Destiny Rescue as we raise awareness about the desperate situation children find themselves in where they are stripped of their dignity and liberty.